Well, hi everyone, and welcome to Success Secrets and Stories. Today, we're going to be talking in our author to author series on stories with Ted Santos. And Ted is the founder and CEO of Turnaround Investment Partners. He's also written a book, Here's Why You Can't Find Love. And I think, Ted, when we're talking about the things that you've done, I'd like to start with the book because I find the book a very interesting starting point and gives an interesting beginning of some of the things that you're trying to teach
Mm,
in your position and how you're working with CEOs. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what inspired you to write the book and the message that you're trying to get across.
sure. Well, first, I want to say thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to a very engaging conversation. So, thanks for inviting me.
Sure.
So, the book, uh, divorce rates over 50%, and I've had a concern. In fact, a number of colleagues would always ask me, "Why are you always worried about divorce and the impact on business?" And I'm like, it's it can't be free. It has to be impacting us in some way. So divorce rate is somewhere between 53 and 55%
Yeah.
in the US. And when I started digging deeper, I did find the financial impact. There's an organization called Life Innovation, and they said corporate America is losing over $300 billion every year in workplace productivity.
Wow.
And it's because of divorce. When people are going through divorce, their productivity drops between 50 and 75%. And think about it, if a percentage of your people are headed for divorce, so they are distracted, a percentage are in the middle, and then there's another percentage that just came out of it. These are people who are distracted. A close friend of mine took 1 year off from work so he could recalibrate his life. He had been married 20 years. And not everyone can do that. So imagine if he couldn't afford to do that, he would have clocked in every day and he would have been somewhere else getting paid. So that's a problem. And in addition to the 300 billion to corporate America, there's another 30 billion to the taxpayer because divorce uh, creates poverty, there's crime, you need
Yeah.
social programs. There are all these things, and that bill is, it's given to the taxpayer. So
Right.
divorce is not free. And the more, it seems, the more divorce we have, the more people think divorce is a solution.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Right. So, it's creating a mindset. It's distracting us from work. It's adding crime, poverty, and it's like this invisible hand that's sucking kind of the life out of society, and we're pretending it's not happening. So it's like a leg is cut off and we're just hopping around pretending that everything's okay, and we're going to run a marathon while we're slitting our wrist, and no one is talking about it. It's just sort of business as usual. Now, here's the interesting thing. I looked at marriage rates. This was a couple of years ago, and marriage rates were at an all-time low. They first started recording marriage rates in 1865, and it's never been this low since 1865.
Yeah. And
Except if
I'm
you're in
sorry.
the affluent class, marriage rates haven't dropped. So if you're in a corporation, the people around you, your colleagues, most of them remain married. It's the people under you who are getting divorces. And so if I kind of give you a punchline, if I'm integrating the book with corporate America,
Right.
um, I was reading that they asked many executives, "What skill do you wish you were better at?" And the majority said conflict resolution. I'm willing to bet if people were
Yeah.
better with conflict resolution at work and at home, the divorce rate would drop. So,
Absolutely.
so I wrote the book, and the book takes the reader on a journey of transformation. One is better understanding self, so that you can choose someone who's compatible. And they said the reason the affluent have a low divorce rate is they've done a better job of finding a compatible partner. And
Okay.
the partner is compatible even in the face of them losing it all, sleeping out of a car, having to move to, their parents' home, and there's no split. The spouse, the wife doesn't say, "Hey, I thought you were going, you were the golden child, and here we are sleeping out of a car. I'm out." The guy Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, he's
Sure.
an example of someone who slept out of his car. His wife never left, and the rest is history. Look where they are. So I'm asserting a lot of people don't have the skills to manage the conflict, and often it's simple misunderstandings. So if we looked at corporate social responsibility in a new light, corporations could transform the culture of the nation and reduce divorce. If they trained people to develop the kinds of skills that are valuable to the corporation, and then people take those same skills and competencies and a mindset home, and now people have a better home life, which means they'll be more productive at work, and they're more productive and fulfilling at work, and they're going to have a better home life. It self-perpetuates. Right now, the self-perpetuation is unhappy home life, divorce, I'm work sucks, I don't want to be here. And what do you do when you have, a big percentage of your people who are not productive? It affects profits. You start laying people off, and you don't lay off the people going through divorce. You just randomly lay people off, which now will put pressure on other households and push them towards divorce. And so
Yeah.
it's, this downward spiral. So I wrote the book to support people, and being able to create relationships. And I was saying to you guys, the punchline of the book is love doesn't create a great relationship. Love is a byproduct of a great relationship. So if you develop the skills, competencies, you have a better inventory of self, and you know who's compatible, and you come together with someone, you're with that compatibility, with the skills, competencies, affinity is going to grow out of it. and and then boom, you have love comes out of that. I mean, you guys have an affinity for one another. You work together. You know that you're both competent in something. It's like, wow, you're competent in this. You're competent in that. We can do something here.
Right. And when I look at those kind of lessons, that the ability, I think, is the one term that I've heard so many times in so many different applications. It's communication, and to understand the things that side rail communication.
Right.
Conflict resolution is another example of communication.
Absolutely.
And if you don't understand the things that derail it, the drama triangle, the things that are associated with old things that happened in the past that you're bringing up that happened 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and you're not in the now, you're not dealing with the issue that is present,
Right.
that you'll spend more time hashing something that you should have put in the pocket and put away a long time ago.
Right.
And you're not getting, you have to get to the point of actually having the discussion that needs to happen. And sometimes it's understand the noise has to get out of the way.
Well, it's sometimes, well, if you think of a marriage as being no different than a merger and acquisition in corporate America, two companies come together. What's the new corporate culture? Do we take one cu- culture from one organization? Do we amalgamate the two, or do we just create something new that could have never existed? I like the example of how do we get water, hydrogen and oxygen come together and create something neither of them could have done on their own. So as human beings, we have that capacity. I mean, we are made of atoms, right? So
Right.
technically, we have that capacity innate in us. So when you have a marriage and two people come together, it's like, well, that's not the way my family did it. Well, my family did it this way, and we did it the right way. So,
Yeah, we did it the right way. There's a defining answer.
and your way is ridiculous. And
Yeah, now they went from a 10-minute discussion to you're tacking in at least an hour before you find resolution.
oh, that's going to be 5 years. They're going to be saying, I remember when you said my way, you talked about my family. I know what you're trying to, oh man, so, and so if when we speak of conflict resolution, what you don't hear is the secret, the essence of conflict resolution has nothing to do with the other person or the situation. It's it's you being triggered and resolving your internal conflicts that have not been resolved. So you are triggered and angry with the person for something they reminded you of or you associate with, and now you're fighting your own internal conflict and you think it's about the other person. But when you, and this is grammatically incorrect, when you untrigger your triggers, so
Okay. Yeah.
when you unlearn your triggers and how you arrive there, now you're not triggered and you can actually be with the person, as you were saying, be present to the person, and you don't go into this tailspin of chaos about how angry you are. And I know what you mean when you say that. What you only know to the extent it happened in the past. So basically, you are putting your past in the future and reliving some past moment and taking it out on that person, and you have no capacity to resolve the conflict in you. So you're fighting yourself and the other person at the same time. So
Right. Right. I think one of the I've been married for 50 years.
wow,
Actually, it'll be 50 in December. And
congratulations.
thank you. And the humor that I have every once in a while is I'll answer the question and my wife will say, "Yeah, but that's not what you mean." It's
Exactly.
like, "Oh, well, what did I mean to say?" And all of a sudden, it's like that conversation went from 5 minutes to you got another 5 to 10 minutes to get back to point one because you're going to have to answer that one that's implied. And I think that's a part for communication in a business environment for people to understand. There's nuances. There's so many different things that go on with the communication that the past, what you're trying to get going forward, being clear in how you're messaging so that you have a clear message, that you're not making it up as you're speaking. No way to
Right.
disrail a management team than having the manager or the supervisor giving rough generalities of a goal. You have to be somewhat specific for people to know what the goal is to be achieved. There has to be some
Right.
thought behind the recommendations. You talk about another concept in your role as a consultant, and you talk about how to be disruptive to management and taking that next step. Greg, would you like to follow up on
I
what
absolutely
we
would,
were
John.
talking about?
Thank you. Yeah, when I saw the disruptive leadership model, and I think about what that means in marketing and things like that, as far as the marketplace and your share of the pie and what have you, and we think about how to help first line supervisors be better. And it seems like, well, if I disrupt everything, if I make them crazy and reinvent things, how are they going to be successful as young leaders? So, how do you get them to be successful as young leaders with that kind of a concept, the disruptive leadership model?
Sure. That's a mindset, and it's also, especially if you are a young leader or a supervisor, one of the things that you want to develop is communication, where you're asking your people um, questions about who they are, the things they'd like to accomplish, what they are good at, what they would like to be good at. And then there are going to be some transferable skills, and people don't always know how to express that. So when you can tease that out, what that does, it provides a platform for you to be able to stretch and move people in directions that they normally wouldn't consider, and it would be, the proverbial comfort zone, right? So you're you're moving people in a direction that may make them uncomfortable. With you as a supervisor being able to instill the confidence that, one, I'm here for you, two, I believe in you, right? And three, I trust you, right? And
Yeah.
if things go wrong, I'm ultimately responsible. I'm willing to, if it goes bad, it's on me. So we're going to step out and we're going to try something. And then you have a team. You start to have a team that looks like it's being led by Steve Jobs, where he's asking you to do things that you've never done, and you do it. And if you have breakdowns, a good supervisor leader will factor breakdowns, problems, disruption into your plan because they happen, especially when you want to accomplish something you've never done in the past. And you'll encounter things that you haven't encountered, um, which adds some complexity to it because you may not always have the skills and competencies. I know when you guys were talking about optimism, that instead of the default for humans, and the default is what's wrong with me, what's wrong with him or her, or the whole system, something's wrong with it. We are trained to think that way, believe it or not, whether it's intentional or not. It's just a default that we give to one another. What's wrong with you? How could you do that? So we just automatically think, it's not me, it's you that's wrong, or just like saying your family did it wrong, my family did it right,
Yeah.
So, but when you can look at what's missing, I heard you guys talk about that in the optimism podcast. As opposed to looking at what's wrong, we have a gap. Here's where we are. Here's where we're committed to going. What's missing in that gap? So being a disruptive leader requires a very different mindset and training. And that training, the real power is in the gap. How do you manage and navigate not only yourself, how do you navigate a team through that gap in the face of them saying, we don't know how to do this?
So, Ted, I would add, or maybe kind of dovetail some things John's talked a lot about, we've talked about, and that's change. Just the whole concept of recognizing things are not going to stay static. They're not going to never be different. How do you manage change? And a disruptive approach would tell you, get ready, because we're not going
Right.
back to the old way necessarily. We're going to do something different and get their minds ready for that.
Right. That's an important conversation to have in any organization because do you guys know one of the major signs that a company is in trouble?
Outside of the stock price,
They have no R&D or no way to reinvent themselves.
Yeah, that definitely can be a problem. But one of the biggest problems that foretells a company's going to be in trouble is they are doing very well.
Oh, yeah.
complacency.
Right. What if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Everything's fine. Hey man, we make typewriters, okay? And everyone loves our typewriters, man.
Yeah. We got the best typewriter in the
Yeah.
entire world. Yeah.
Did you guys know? So we have on our keyboard the QWERTY, right?
Yep, QWERTY. Yep.
Right. I think it was in the 1930s. Someone reconfigured the keys to be 20% more efficient, so you would type faster. But they had already trained all the secretaries back then, and they said, that's going to require too much training. So this was the dominant design, just we'll leave it as it is. So the typewriter companies were coming up with all kinds of ways to be more efficient or better typewriters. And then some little company created this electric typewriter, and they said, get away, we're working too hard. And then IBM bought the electric typewriter, and then IBM made the transition to computers, and we don't hear about the typewriter companies anymore because they were doing well. Life was good. They were complacent. What do we have to do?
Right.
Just make it. We'll add another feature, another benefit, and that is a sign you're doing well. You're in trouble, and we have this kind of default in what I'll call the human paradigm, which is change is hard. And people have bought that as though it's a fact of life. Change is hard. And I'm willing to bet neither of you were wearing the same clothes yesterday that you're wearing today. So you changed your clothes. People do that with no problem, right? Every 7 years, every cell in our body changes. So we're technically designed for change and transformation. But someone created this conversation that people bought into and never questioned, which is, oh, change is hard.
Yeah.
We just can't. No, you can't expect that from me. It's going to take a long time. Oh,
I was calling a vendor of mine that was a mover, and we were constantly changing. We were making department changes. We were growing and shrinking, and they would move the department, and then I'm calling them back 2 weeks later, and we're moving the department to another space. There was another approach in terms of R&D,
right,
and constantly fluid. And they kept on saying, you're wasting a lot of money. Can't they stay in the same seat? It's in the same building. And I kept on saying, no, we have to keep on going. They sent me a little picture frame with the terms that I would always say at the end of every discussion. Change is good. It's what we're
exactly.
doing. It's in a dynamic company that you're right. If people understand change as part of their culture, they have to embrace it. Then you're going to see an organization that grows. And I think you at a CEO level of training and consulting people, if that energy isn't there for change, you're probably telling them that there's ways to try to change yourself, change the organization, but if you don't, you're going to close doors.
Right.
I'm sure that doesn't go over very well either.
Yeah. When you're speaking, I'm thinking of Navy SEALs. Do you guys have any idea how much the United States government invests into one Navy SEAL?
No.
I'm sure it's an outlandish number.
$2 million.
Wow, it's
Wow.
like a jet plane. Wow.
And those guys are trained to be able to navigate and manage chaos, to accomplish their mission in the face of anything. So and I've never been a Navy SEAL. I've met some, but and most people have said to me, "Oh, all they're doing with Navy SEAL training is they're just breaking them down and brainwashing them." And I'm like, no, it's actually they are disrupting the way they already think, the actions they take, and what they believe is possible or impossible, and they support them to break through their limiting beliefs. So when you build a culture like that, and it has to start with the CEO. When you build that kind of culture, you are able to shift on a dime. So the economy changed, the competitive landscape changed.
Right.
So not only can we um, manage those changes, we can also lead them. So instead of
And
waiting and being reactive, we can drive it and force the marketplace. So we can disrupt ourselves and then disrupt the marketplace.
so COVID taught us a lot in terms of change. I remember I was in the hospital side, and at one point they said, well, we can't have computers actually giving doctors visits. They have to see someone in order for our systems to work. We don't have the capacity or the capability to bring doctors into a house so
Right.
that they can have an appointment.
Right.
COVID hit. All of a sudden, it happened in every application. Every doctor had the vehicle in order to pull it off. And it was instant. And they were asking for that for decades. And all of a sudden, they
Interesting.
found the way to get it done because there wasn't any other choice.
Right. Very interesting. Right. I think COVID had a profound impact, and I'm not sure if we are reaping all the benefits of that. I mean, it would. It's. I have thoughts at a very very high level, but yeah, COVID showed us something, and I've been talking about it for about 20 years, and so anyway.
Yeah. So if you were to try to summarize some of the messages that you would expect to hear from a supervisor, a manager, to understand how to change culture and how to embrace a change culture, what would that address sound like? What would be the core message for them to understand that they need to implement to bring to their employees?
So as a supervisor, uh, when I was saying initially, have conversations with them and understand their capacity and what they are committed to in the future. You really need to take a stand. It's you taking a stand for your people and standing for them more than they may know they can do. So your job is to pull more out of people than they know how to pull out of themselves. And one tactical way to do that is when you have a good idea as to who they are, what they're capable of, and some of their tangential skills and competencies, you can ask them to do things that you know they don't know how to do.
Good point.
And they'll fail at it, but you have to be okay with them failing because they are training, they are learning, and and the fact that you are there to support them uh, will create a very strong trusting bond between the two of you, and they're more likely when you ask them to do the impossible, they'll just take it on because they know they have your support, and if it goes wrong, you're going to be accountable for it. So that's something that's really important. I personally learned that, and I was saying I was thrown into the fire at the age of 21. I lost both parents, and I'm the oldest of four. So imagine I'm 21, my brother's 19, and my sisters are 12 and 16. So my brother's on a full ride football scholarship. I take him off to college. And even though my sisters, I had them live with my father's sister and aunt, I still needed them to do things for me. My parents had a house, they had property, there was a whole estate. And so I would ask my sisters to do things, and I knew they didn't know how to do it. I knew they were going to fail, and I never gave them instructions on how to do it. This is the this is the outcome I'm seeking. Can you take care of that? Sure. They go, they fail. And then I turned into Socrates. So I would ask them questions. Instead of telling them how to do it, I would ask questions. And they'd go back and they'd fail again. And they'd come to me and I'd ask them questions. And they'd go and they fail. Well, what happened over time is they started developing, talk about change in their brain, they started developing a new way of solving problems, a new way of thinking about problems. And so in
Yeah.
time, I could ask them to do something they didn't know how to do, and they could go a lot further than they would have in the past, and then come back and say, I'm stuck. And then it was to the point they didn't have to come back to me. And they would start
Awesome.
volunteering for things that they normally wouldn't do. So when I was running organizations, my people would come to me and say, Ted, I'm stuck. I have a problem. And I just would be Socrates. What would you do if I wasn't here? Well, I do this, this, and this. Well, if you do that, what about this? Ha, didn't think of that. Okay, bye. Uh, and then they'd come and say, okay, I have this problem. I already know you're going to ask me these questions. I've already thought about those things, and now I'm stuck. And so I still asked the question. Eventually, they didn't need me anymore. Like,
Right.
we don't need you. We've got this worked out. Go away, man.
The other thing that you reminded me is that in my organizations that, in my experience in the organizations I worked for,
Sure.
they had training programs, they had training dollars, they had school uh,
Right.
funds that could be utilized, and there was very few people that ever took anyone up on taking those classes and going
Really.
back to school and trying to do the improvement. But you would find those individuals that would start to show the inquisitiveness and starting to have that drive of career and wanting to take that next step.
Right.
And it's like, well, why aren't you using? You're getting $5,000 a year. You have a benefit, and you've never used it.
Hmm. Interesting.
You know, I give them the examples when I was going to school. I got my undergrad. Um, it took me 11 years, and technically it took me 8. I got transferred in the middle of that, but it was 11 years, and I got my bachelor's degree.
Okay.
And I would have relatives say, is he ever going to stop going to school? But I wanted to improve myself. I wanted to be able to take that next step in my career. And I knew that I needed that background and I needed that education in order to make
Right.
that change. But I also utilized the funds that were available to me. I didn't have a job until halfway through that process that I could use their funds. But
Hmm.
it was that drive to understand that there is something there. There are vehicles sometimes that can help you get that goal, but you have to have the spark and you have
Right.
to have the drive to take it that next step.
Yeah, I was a sales trainer, and I remember a sales training company talking about it's usually the high performers who are willing to even go back to the basics. They're already good, but they'll go back and refresh, they'll learn the basics and then work their way up. And many other people are like, well, I'm already good, so I don't need that stuff.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's the people
There's
who
a problem
really
of
are good. Yeah, sorry. It's what?
yeah. That well, there's some that actually earned that title that had that capacity,
Right.
but they usually end up shooting themselves in the foot. Greg, I think you had a great example of somebody that you had in your past that was an outstanding executive, but it ended up shooting himself in the foot because he didn't listen.
Yeah,
Hmm.
very bad listener, and because he thought he knew it all, and that he was very intelligent, he was very well educated, but his ego kind of matched up with his brains, and so he wasn't open to what I used to call lifelong learning because he knew it all. And
Hmm.
at some point, some more senior people said, "You don't know it all, and you either need to decide you want to learn or you're going to do something different." And he ended up going somewhere else, but he just couldn't see it. He was so brilliant, yet not so smart. If that makes any sense.
Interesting. So he couldn't really. It's almost the I don't know if you've seen the example where you're filling a teacup with tea and it's filled and nothing else can go in it. So he's already full. Like he can't even learn anything else. My teacup is full. There's nothing you can offer me. And people often talk about the mind of the beginner, and the mind of the beginner is always available to learn new things, even though they are an expert. I mean, you think of Nikola Tesla,
Mm-hmm.
and the guy was brilliant, but I mean, he never stopped learning. He never stopped inventing new things, and that he clearly was a genius, and he just never stopped.
Unfortunately, people think of Thomas Edison more than they do of Nikola Tesla.
True. Yeah.
Not when you look at AC and DC. Tesla
Right.
Tesla was the guy.
That's right. That is right.
So, Ted, we're getting close to the end of our interview. Is there something that you would like to talk about in terms of the things that you're working on and a little bit about your organization?
Sure. So I have a philosophy when we speak of disruptive leadership. So it's either you disrupt yourself or you'll be disrupted by the marketplace. And if you are the CEO, your job, one of your major, most important jobs, is to intentionally create problems. And if you're not doing that, you should be fired or retrained immediately. And when you can build a culture that can support you, so, you are Steve Jobs is a great example. Put 1,000 songs on a listening device. How do we do that? We don't know. That's your problem. I mean, I'm being a little callous about it, but
Right.
I hired you guys to do that. That's the outcome. It needs to be small enough to fit into your pocket and hold 1,000 songs. We've never done it. No one's done it. And that's your job. And out comes an iPod. And then he says, great, now turn it into a cell phone. How do we do
Right.
that? Why are we making cell phones? This makes no sense, right? But these become breakthroughs. So you can understand that at any level in an organization, from a um, frontline worker to a supervisor, a manager, a VP, it doesn't matter. One of the things, if you are committed to climbing the corporate ladder, what I just said is really important. because supervisors, managers, they are hired and they are rewarded for solving problems, and they're great at it. What the people who make the transformation from problem solver to problem creator are the ones who receive the key to the executive offices, to the executive
Sure.
bathroom. So if it, we were talking, alluding to this a few minutes ago, even if you're a supervisor, don't be afraid to stretch your people beyond what they think they can do.
Right.
Your people are brilliant. You know, when I'm telling you about my parents dying and coaching my sisters up, my sisters had greater capacity than anyone would think a 12 or 16-year-old can do. So it just says a lot about people and their resilience and their capacity to accomplish things if they have the appropriate guidance around them. My sisters trusted me. I mean, we lost parents. I'm the oldest, so I have maybe a different relationship with them than most. But even in organizations, I was able to earn that kind of trust from my people. And yes, they did give pushback. And how can you? We can't do those things. We're going to be out of business if we do that. And when they saw where it elevated us to a high performing organization, now everyone was on board. So don't be afraid to stretch your people. Uh, don't be afraid of chaos. The normal default is to think something's wrong, and the most effective way to look at it is what's missing. So we are in a gap. So being able to navigate yourself and others, whether you're a supervisor or a CEO, is really critical in business, and in your, we go back to my book, and in your intimate relationships. That
Right.
chaos is not the problem.
So I saw that your book's available on Amazon, and if they wanted to get a hold of you in terms of the work as a founder and the CEO of Turnaround Investment Partners, how would they contact you?
Sure. You can email me personally, tsantos at turnaroundip.com. And my book is also found inside the brick and mortar Barnes and Noble stores, as well as their
Awesome.
website. So Barnes and Noble carries it.
Awesome. So thank you, Ted Santos, for all the help that you've helped give us in terms of trying to help leaders understand the next step and understand additional challenges that they need to bring to the community that they're working for the organizations, for the company, and maybe a little bit at home too. So I think it's a lot of words of wisdom. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me. And I'm sorry to just say this last. If someone is interested in a free 30-minute consultation, please email me and we can set that up, and I can help you in any way that I can in that time. I'm willing to offer that. So thanks for having me. It's been my pleasure.
That's
Thank you, Ted.
awesome. So that's a wrap of our episode of Stories Author to Author. I hope you've enjoyed diving into the creative mind and the stories about the book, how it was developed. So until next time, keep reading, keep writing, and keep sharing those stories. See you soon.